want to start?
Sure.
Bunch of audio guys, nobody wants to talk.
Yeah, I know he's the name around here, but we are what you might call the DIY contingent. So John is a writer. You want to speak for yourself in that capacity, my friend?
I'm a writer.
He is a writer. And the short version of our story is that we are blessed to be friends. We are blessed to have a group of talented friends. We have friends that write and produce and act and do all kinds of fun things. And the short version, again, is that we had a story to tell, and we figured out that a way that we could tell it very effectively with what is essentially a low barrier of entry in terms of money, far lower than if you're going to make a film or a video or anything of that nature, well, the first suggestion was podcast. And so you hear podcast, you think conversational, or you maybe think fiction podcast. But as we discussed the project, the scope of it became more ambitious. And I think the model for what we were looking at doing was something along the lines of, there's a company out of the UK called Big Finish Productions. They've done full cast audio drama for Doctor Who, and UFO, and Space 1999, and even Dark Shadows. A lot of licensed properties, and a few original things as well. There's also things like the Sandman audio series on Audible that was produced by this gentleman, Dick Bogard, out of the UK. What I find is that the British had this ongoing tradition of radio drama that never stopped.
Yeah,
yes,
right. Absolutely.
So BBC4, they've always done it. And so you have engineers and writers and directors and actors that know how to do it from this long tradition. And what we see here in our American space is slowly but surely, and lately, not slowly anymore, there's a boom. And people basically having a very similar epiphany to the one that our team did, which is, we can tell a vivid story full of great characters and mood and atmosphere, and we can tell it in the format that we want to, and the length of episode that we want to, and the length of season that we want to, at the pace that we can. And the only thing between us in achieving that goal is hard work and ambition. And so, what started as a way to tell the story we wanted to tell without video became something that we were so enamored with and in love with, this medium of audio drama, that we would not do it any other way now. And I think if we have anything to say up here, it's that if you want to, you maybe can too. You do the work. So.
And I just want to say, this is Tony Mercer, this eloquent man, my friend and partner in this, and I'm John Kenneth Muir, and the series we are talking about is Enter the House Between. We have 9 episodes, first full season, out in the can. Nerd Alert News calls it a must-listen. It's a show, science fiction show, roughly about quantum physics, but what it's really about is sort of anything that crosses my consciousness that interests me, and I then make him create the whole role for me. So what I've learned from this, because I'm the writer, is if I write it, he can create it. And he does a beautiful job creating it. And it took us a little bit of time to get used to, for me, how to write in this medium. And that caused some problems for him, which he has absolutely mastered, but I think I'm a fast learner, and we figured it out. But what has astonished me and why I've fallen in love with this medium is that, unlike a video series, because we had done a video series almost 15 years ago called The House Between, and this is Enter the House Between, that was very expensive and very difficult to do well. And I couldn't really go places. It was about a group of people sort of trapped in a house. And, I could do green screen, but it was dodgy. I mean, I'm not made of money. I'm an independent filmmaker. And this audio world, we can go anywhere and do anything. And he has absolutely mastered the creation of these worlds where we come. So that's just what I wanted to say there.
Well, thanks for the compliment. But the key information there is go anywhere and do anything. And I absolutely believe that. Tony and I were talking about it just before the panel, that the wonderful thing about this medium is if you think about it carefully and you play fair with your audience, there really isn't any kind of story you can't tell. Would you gentlemen agree with that?
Absolutely. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've created everything. Just just with Atlanta Radio Theater Company, we've created things where, you know, we've two separate universes of the same people living in two different worlds. We've created a steampunk world of Lady Sherlock, and if you close your eyes when you do a live show, you'll feel that you're in that world. You know, so I mean, it's radio, audio is, and we talked about this before the panel, sorry, briefing each other.
I feel betrayed.
I'm sorry. The thing that I think is incredible about audio is that it's far more intimate than film, right? If you're watching the Alien movies, at some point, you have to see the alien. I have to show you the alien, right? And Stephen King talks about the 10-foot bug, right? When they pull back the thing and you see a 10-foot bug there, your brain goes, oh my God, it's a 10-foot bug. But at least it's not a 100-foot bug. And if they showed you a 100-foot bug, your brain would say, well, at least it's not a 200-foot bug. In audio, we never show you the monster. Your mind does it for us. And if I could just tell a quick story, in our in the premiere episode of the Harris Strange radio drama, we eviscerated a guy. Okay, so again, you get kind of an idea of what that show's about. And the evisceration happens because my sound designer came up with the idea of peeling an orange in front of the microphone. And it was so awesome. It sounded so great. And we had a premiere party, right? So we had the cast and all the cast friends and relatives. They all came to it. And the producer and I were in the back watching. So when we got to the evisceration, people are like, they're cringing around in their seats, and all they were looking at was a radio. There was no picture, just an old-fashioned radio. One lady actually put her hands in front of her eyes to make the scene stop. Okay. And that's like the height of...
And let's go back to the dawn of radio drama, which was in the 20s.
Right.
And they created all these stuff that we are recreating.
Now, right, yeah.
Now, admittedly, I had studied that in college and things like that. So, what was the most famous radio drama broadcast in the United States? World of the Worlds. And it panicked a large number of people. Not the whole country, but a large number of people. And because it sounded so real. And plus, Orson Welles was brilliant.
Right.
Possibly got thrown in jail.
and
for that.
If you think about audio today, like back then you were listening to a big funky radio. Now, right, you're actually in their heads when you're producing this, right? People are listening on earbuds. That gives you a lot of leeway and a lot of power. Use it wisely, for good. But that gives you a lot of power to tell your story and to control what your audience is thinking. And that's what you want. And filmmakers, you can make the best horror movie in the world, but at some point the lights come on. You read the Blair Witch wasn't real. It's scary while you're there, but you walk out with it. That evisceration, I guarantee you, to this day, that woman still thinks about that evisceration because it was just so intense for her that she had to cover her own eyes. You were doing that.
In the old time radio, there was something they did. Oh yeah, it was they would turn the man inside out. Yeah. And this was on Lights Out, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
And what they did is they got a inner tube from a tire. They put it in the water. They lowered the microphone to it, and they slowly touched the thing. And it's like, it's all very icky and all this stuff. And you're going, my God, they're turning the man inside out.
And just by looking at some of y'all's faces, you're hearing that, aren't you?
Yes, you can hear that. And that was really good about old time radio.
See, and I guess thinking about those things is, not one of us up here is going to say we hate movies.
Right.
No. We love movies and we love special effects and what can be done with them. But, you know, I started my career as an educator and trying to get kids to read. And I remembered back when I was 9 and reading Jules Verne for the first time. I hadn't seen the Disney movie, 20,000 Leagues yet. I hadn't seen any of the movies yet. And trying to get through that and read and learn to love reading. Radio dramas in the 20s, no one was saying, oh, well, this isn't done in Dolby Atmos.
Right.
I can't hear people.
Right. It was mono. It's like, this has this much bandwidth.
I will tell you this, I started at Oasis in 2010, and we were still required to give Audible mono files.
Oh, wow.
It was only after they changed their rules because of their own productions that they use our money to fund, that they were allowing, you know, more stereo type sound.
Right.
And so we've actually just built an Atmos studio, and by the time we had it finished, there's an all-new, better.
Yeah.
Atmos 5.1.
Yeah, and so, you know, we're behind the times, but still, we have, we did a radio dramatization of a Nashville production of Frankenstein that was a stage production done in, I believe, 2017 or 2018. And my wife and I happened to be driving down to Florida for vacation, and we always stay in Franklin, Tennessee, and it was the opening night of Frankenstein. I mean, we knew it was going to be there, so we bought our tickets in advance, but my wife said I was on the edge of my seat the entire time.
Yep.
So after the show, I got in touch with the producer, and I said, I want to do this in audio. So we assembled the full cast, and that was the first time we played around with Atmos sound. So we have crowds, and if you listen to it with earbuds or headphones, you actually hear the crowd behind you. But it's, you create something that is so beautifully rendered, and yet it's still allowing, like you were talking about the bugs, you know,
Right.
it's allowing your mind's eye to still create. And I love old-time radio now more than I did before I started at that company, because going back and listening to it, and to think of the old-time radio of Flash Gordon,
Yeah.
and that was, I believe,
Well, that's a kid's show.
I know, but wasn't that Gail Gordon from the I Love Lu or from the Lucy show? Was the voice of Flash, and was like,
No, I don't think
no,
that
are you sure?
I
It was just someone who I was not impressed by.
But yeah, there
Yeah.
were definitely people who just would go from one place to the other,
Right.
and the people that you really wanted were the people who had multiple voices. And there's, you know, no blank.
Right, well, this would have been,
No,
yeah, this would have, the Flash Gordon show was, I think, about 25 years before he was on the Lucy show.
Yeah.
He was someone in Flash Gordon, it may have been me,
It could be.
but when you think of Mr. Mooney, the banker from
Yeah.
the Lucy show, and as I, you know, as someone in that, it's very different. It's very different, and you know, before we started talking to everyone up here, we were just talking about Neil Gaiman and about, you know, his Sandman series that's on Audible, and you know, I think years ago, comic artists and comic writers and fiction writers were probably dreaming of having movies made, and Neil loves audio. He
Yeah.
loves the format.
Oh, yeah.
He loves the medium.
Yep.
And he could have anything. I mean, he's got movies. He's got everything. So
I'm glad you
And if
said
you
that.
haven't,
I'm glad you said that, because I came from a tradition of reviewing films. I write books about film.
Right.
And I became conditioned to see symbols, visual symbols,
Right.
what does the eye detect, visual juxtaposition, all those things. So when we began to do this, I wasn't at all certain that I was going to like this, because I was trained, I am trained, we're all with movies trained
We're all trained visually, yeah.
visually,
Right.
right? And how are you going to create suspense orally? How are you going to do that? How are you going to show me this thing that's attacking people orally and have that suspense? And in our first story, we have these sort of machine bugs called Legion that sort of team over people, and they zap people and quantum decohere them, right? And I thought, how is that going to work?
Right.
How did that work, Tony?
I mean, are you asking me how the Legion were built?
Yeah, how did you do it? I mean, because it's,
What the-
people have said they love that episode, and that it's incredibly suspenseful. Our first story where these bugs like sort of come in through a portal, and they're overrunning a farm, so they're crawling across the farm, crawling across a barn, going up the barn. Our characters are trying to get down and into the house to escape these things.
Well, I mean, I think so. Clearly you need symbiosis between the writing and performance and the sound, right? So in the writing, we're going to introduce an idea. In the performance, we're going to sell you the idea. And then in the sound design, we're going to identify what that idea sounds like. So if I say to you in the performance and in the script that I am introducing you to something dangerous, and I call it Legion, and then Legion makes a very distinct sound that immediately conjures certain ideas in your mind of what it probably looks like, then I just have to go back to that sound and related sounds at the right moment to remind you of their presence. And then when you start talking about them moving around and the sounds you built of them moving around, incorporate the sounds you built of when you introduce them. I mean, I don't know if I'm explaining this well, but that's the gist of it. So in the case of the Legion, the idea was these things were machines built from available parts by a madman. So when it comes down to the sound design, at least in their first iteration, no spoilers, I wanted them to sound very much homemade, as if these were something cobbled together by some nutty professor, as it were. So you're basically taking a lot of household sounds, small servos and Dremel sounds and knives and scissors and various other secret ingredients that are actually mundane sounds that are just layered in with everything else to give it the sharpness and the depth that it needs. And you end up with something that approximates in sound what I envisioned in my head, which was this little metal sphere, think a phantasm, that suddenly snaps open these blades. Nice. Think Wolverine, right? Yeah. So if I can create something that conjures that image, and on that topic of image, and I'll pass the mic around. Let's get back to what you guys were saying about cinema for a minute, because I mean I love cinema. We all love cinema. That's largely why we're all here. But now in this modern context, I don't think cinema is our rival or our enemy. It's our friend, because that very training that gives us all these sort of visual ideas that represent all these things that we've seen in all these movies, that's my ally when I'm sound designing. Because as much as we try to avoid cliches, and we do, one of our mantras is the right cliche at the right moment tells the audience exactly what I need them to know in shorthand, because I'm using something you've heard before to conjure an image that you've seen before, to communicate something to you that you instantly understand, and then we can move on into the next bit of the story. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah, and there's a great example of that in Sandman episode, season 3, where someone is essentially, a witch is flying one of the characters somewhere, and you hear wind, and you hear the chords of flying music from an orchestra that you've heard in every Disney cartoon ever made. And it's all you need, all they needed, right, to give you that image of a guy flying across the sky. But Atmos is great, orchestras are great, you don't need any of that, right? If you're building this, if you're creating your own studio, most of us have a studio right here. You got a closet, right? You got somewhere to keep it down. What you need is a story, and you do need some effects to tell the story. But story, and maybe because I'm a writer, story is king. Okay, you got to tell me a compelling story, or I'm not going to care about any of the cool sound effects in the job. Just like your horror movies, right? You got to tell me it's got to be a good story, right? Or I'm not going to care how big the bug is, because your story sucks. So that's where you should focus.
Absolutely. And as you guys are talking about it, I'm getting more and more envious that I don't get to do more drama style and that I do straight reads.
Well, you could hire us.
Well, I could. And I will say that, I will tell you this, I was thinking as we were talking about, like H.P. Lovecraft, what kind of sound effects would you need? Dripping water and a creaking floor. And
that we do a lot of.
I'm going to step back.
You know what I mean, though?
Right?
Yeah, no, but I mean,
done a lot.
But I'm just saying, for H.P. Lovecraft, you could have all sorts of elaborate effects, but you don't need it. Dripping water, some creaking floor, and that would send chills up people's spines at the right time.
Right.
Which is what you're doing,
And stuff that we didn't steal from old-time radios. We didn't have very good scores because they didn't. Radio was not the most profitable thing.
Right.
It was the big thing, but movies were really profitable.
Coming in. Yeah.
And radio shows, they were the TV of their day.
Right.
But they didn't have to have a lot of work on them.
Honestly, I think it's exactly the same now. And it goes back to your comment, Tony, about, you don't have to be enemies, it's friends.
No.
And because it's a lot more affordable to do radio dramas or to do audiobooks than it is to do TV or film.
Right.
To do it right. And you guys may not experience this. I've experienced it because in our business we hire mainly Screen Actors Guild talent. And so we have had to be very open-minded about non-union actors who we've been hiring to read our straight narrations lately, although the SAG strike did allow for certain concessions to be made for audiobooks.
Yeah.
Right.
But so many of the talent didn't want to do that because they felt they were betraying their own. And so, you know, we were kind of tied, our hands were tied there. Whereas with radio drama, if you're doing grassroots and you're doing your own thing, you have so much more freedom. And that's kind of why I say I'm very envious of what you guys get to do.
Just let me, to talk about that, with my project coming up, I inadvertently, and there's no budget right now, so nobody's getting paid for this, but I inadvertently brought on 2 SAG actors who asked me if I was a SAG production, which I was like, I don't know. So one of them, the answer was no, right? Yeah. But so what he did was he went to SAG and he filled out, and this was before pre-strike, he filled out all the paperwork for me. 2 very nice people from SAG East in New York called me, and they asked me, is your budget under $10,000? Yes. Is it, you know, a couple other things. So to work with SAG as an independent producer is very easy. Oh yeah, it's super. You know, like if you guys are thinking about this, right, it's just a form. If your budget hits $10,000, then it's going to be another form, and then you have to set aside.
Which I don't think happens in radio.
It's not going to happen. I mean, it does if like audible-wise,
yes.
but you know,
yeah, sure.
But you know that we actually have several SAG people.
Well, that was the problem. Michael Mallon was the issue.
Oh,
so
yes,
one
and
of your
he performs with us. And Doug Kay, going back to the original, the beginning of Artsy,
right.
He's been a SAG after person, Doug Kay.
Okay, yeah.
And he's been with us. All right, so once a year, a group of actors, all SAG after actors, put on a radio show based on the old time stuff. In the what's it called? The Shakespeare Tavern.
Okay.
They've been doing this for 20 years. All the money goes to the Atlanta Food Bank. It's entirely, so it's, who do they get to run their union stuff for all the tech? The Atlanta Radio Theater Council. We've been helping them for over 10 years do this, and it's just wonderful. We work with them, you know, they know that we're non-union people, but they can't get the actual, the electricians' unions or whatever. I don't know.
And all that.
Yeah, the people who actually run boards. But no, we can do that, and we have gotten some of those people to record for us because we are way under.
Well, not only that, for a live performance, there is no SAG requirement.
Now,
for a recorded performance,
but there's an after.
Right, there is after, right? Yes.
Because here's the important thing, and this is actually very useful for all of you.
For everybody.
At a science fiction, at basically a convention, the rules of AFTRA and SAG do not apply. It's considered a private thing, a private venue, private event. And so they can come perform with us. So we've had like John Lee Davies perform with us, we had Jonathan Harris perform with us, all the Dragon Con, because that's where the talent is. And so, yes, you can get away with that. And I didn't know that until I started asking people.
Right. Well, the fact that you guys got to deal with New York for SAG, which probably Jane and
Andy?
Okay, look, yeah, Jane and Karen here. She's in charge of that, and she's the one who keeps trying to get us to become a union shop, and we won't.
Well, they do push for that, yeah.
Because our company is owned by ultra conservatives, and they would never ever do that. But we pay through a union paymaster, so we abide by all their rules. But the beauty of it, and this is what I learned, is they are negotiable, especially if you have young talent who is not worth the SAG hourly finished rate. They will negotiate with you because they consider you mentoring and bringing those talents up, and they do scales. And but they also, depending on the talent you want to hire for a non-union production, you can still do the SAG Taft-Hartley thing where you name them a producer, the talent is...
Oh, yeah.
Right, and then they get their producer fee, which is nothing.
Yes.
So then
But it looks good on paper.
But it keeps them out of trouble.
Yes.
And I wanted to say, talking about talent, I want to do a shout out. We have our 2 stars of Enter the House Between here. Please stand up, Kim Breeding Mercer and Alicia Martin. Katoon. Stand up, come on, stand up, Kim.
Do you have your union cards?
Yeah, you called her out in front of everybody.
That's right, absolutely. But what we're talking about here is, you know, you talk about falling in love with faces in movies, but what we're talking about here is really falling in love with people's voices.
Right.
And what a wonderful experience, and what a rich experience that is. Again, we've talked about writing, we've talked about sound design, but so much of what is carried in audio drama comes through the performances, the ability to use this instrument, your nonverbal communication, paralanguage, as well as verbal language to create these characters and create these emotions and moments. So I just had to say that for my wonderful cast members out there.
And from the DIY contingent, if you are interested in mounting your own production, because I think all this talk about
if you're here,
hiring union actors can be intimidating, right?
Yes.
So here is my very brief advice. It's perfectly okay to ask your friends and family to be in your show if they can act, right? What you don't want is to use your friends and family because they're what you've got and maybe it doesn't turn out so well because everybody's going to know, okay? But if they can act, there's nothing wrong with using them.
Right.
And if you don't have that advantage, get involved in your local theater community or community theater. Do that. And because I spent, I perform as well, and I spent time in local theater, and some of the most incredible artists I will ever encounter are not famous people that get paid lots of money to do what they do. Right. They're just passionate artists that have studied their craft and do it in any capacity they can. And if you have a good story to tell, and this gets back to Tony's point about story is king, if you have a good story to tell, and you've got that script, and you say, I believe in this project, this is how we're going to do it, I can't pay you, but I'll give you all the credit in the world, we're going to have a lot of fun, and we're going to tell a great story, you will be surprised how, not only how who will agree to do it, but the level of passion you can get from folks that believe in what you're...
Right, what he said.
Yeah, what he said. Right.
Yes.
When I was first starting out with Higher Strange in the dark ages of 2010, I knew nothing about this. I mean, I knew that I had heard the Byron Chronicles and a couple things online. And I thought, oh, this is kind of cool, I'm going to try this. But I knew nothing about, well, where do I find, I didn't know Bill, I didn't know Artsy, I knew of Artsy, but I didn't know them yet. Well, where do I find actors? So I, being not very, not knowing the industry, just sent out casting calls to all of the acting agencies in Atlanta. And that was when Atlanta was just kind of really beginning to become Hollywood South or East or whatever they call us. And I was, sorry?
Yollywood.
Yollywood, yes. I was surprised at the quality of actors who showed up, because I was very clear that I'm not paying anybody. It's all, and it's non-union. So, but the quality of actors, like you said, who came and then read the script and went, oh, I really want to be a part of this, was incredible. And I asked one of them, because she was on, remember the show, she was on everybody was on The Walking Dead, but she was on The Walking Dead, she was on the story about the revolutionary guy who came back from the dead. I can't remember, but she was on like a couple of, and these were speaking roles. They weren't just like background, you see her for her flesh. She was in there for a significant amount of time. And I was like, why are you doing this for free? And she said, well, I want to be a voice actor, and there is no easy way to get into voice acting except through what you're doing.
Yep.
So you will get a lot of quality people who want to do that. And don't abuse my actors. We fed them. I mean, donuts.
Literally.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, literally fed them, donuts and Red Bull on Sunday mornings. And then we did a dinner every season at the end of the season, a wrap party. And they were grateful. And I'm still, friends with a lot of them. And some of them have gone on to do, much bigger things than this. So, Atkins Edmondson, did he work for you? Never mind. Atkins, one of the characters in one of mine was he played a necromancer on one episode. He was in a show opposite Stanley Tucci. He played side by side with him, a BBC production. And he was a mobster in another one. So I mean, the people you meet on the way up, right?
I want to throw a hot take out, and then I'd like to throw what I'm about to say to the panel and get you guys to weigh in on with your opinion on this. So I talked earlier in the panel about how there's an ongoing, steady, they never stop doing it tradition of audio drama in the UK. And I made the comment the actors there know how to do it because there's a tradition that they're drawing on, and it's just one of, it's a smaller show business community, so it's one of many things that they do to work, right? I think while we had this gap between the decline of radio drama, comedy radio programming in the 60s, would you say?
50s.
Yeah.
We had that decline there until now, essentially these past 10 years, where we see the rise of what we're all involved with on some level. What we had instead was voiceover, so ad reads. We had voiceover for animation. And in my view, I have nothing but respect for what those folks do. It is not easy to master, to say the very least. But I think it's a different discipline, ultimately, than drama. Would you agree with that?
I wish it weren't different, because right now I'm involved in a very big restoration project for Ultraman, the original series.
Oh, nice.
And
nice.
The original English or American dubbing cast is exactly the same as Speed Racer. So, I mean, it's the same team from Translux. I mean, they are the same people, and I honestly think they watched just to see if they could say the words closely to make the mouths mesh. And in the live action, they couldn't, but it just, to me, that falls so flat, and I have such a hard time. I mean, watching animation is different than watching dubs in live action.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I've had to watch thousands of hours of Ultraman in the last 2 years for work. I mean, it wasn't even fun. And it's painful at times. Now, the newest Ultraman series, they're actually dubbing it in English in Japan, and it's called Ultraman Blazer, and it's on YouTube, on the official Ultraman channel. And it actually looks great, because they are deliberate in what they're doing. And it's more important to deliver a great line
than to have
the lips line up.
Yeah.
And so, but I mean, I totally agree. But voice acting is a talent in itself.
It is.
But I am so envious of you guys right now.
Well, so I think what's happening, and this is an advantage we have in the independent space, is as the bigger studios and the bigger production companies get interested in mounting audio productions, they do what you would imagine they would do, which is that they hire voiceover artists, and if they're not using a name, or they do use a name, and then they fill out the rest of the cast with voiceover artists. And again, nothing but respect for what those folks do. But I believe, and I genuinely do believe this, I could be wrong, you go out and you find those passionate, dedicated local theater actors or whatever it is that you have access to, and you get those folks to believe in those characters and inhabit those characters and live that truth into that microphone. And what you're going to get is, for what you're doing, a better performance than what you've already said. It's flatter.
Yeah.
Or it's heightened because this person's used to doing animation. And in animation, you need to heighten. Well, that's too high. We're doing human drama here. I need you to ratchet it down a little bit. It's that sweet spot between natural and just heightened enough so we are compensating for the fact that you can't see the actor's face.
Right.
If it's not in the voice, it doesn't exist. Well, you can't take it so far that we're in cartoon territory, or I'm not buying it.
Right. And I think that's casting is so important.
Right.
Finding the right people for the right role.
We have a very different way of doing things. Because we have the live stuff, and then we have the recorded stuff.
Right.
We start with the live things, and that's how we take them out on the road, Broadway. We're opening it Dragon Con or whatever, to do 1B. And that's way before we go into the studio level of this question. And what we have done is we invite people, if you're interested in doing this as acting, come in. We will teach you how to do it. And we take people, some people are great, some people are okay, some people are less than okay. We've only had one person so far where we said, you know, I don't think you can act. Seriously. And it hurt me a lot to say that to this person. I mean, hurt me. Because I thought I was, you know, crueler than that. No. But the thing is, we also have, we have one of our actors has a speech impediment. Mostly because he can't read very well. And what we've discovered is he can memorize it, and then he sounds great. And so we are we're not quite as professional, but what we like to do is we want to bring it to the masses. Not only the hearing, but also the performing as much as we can. And that's what we do. And then by the time we get to the studio, we've got really good actors doing it. And some of those people were, a year ago, not very good.
It sounds like to me, what you guys have that I don't have the luxury of, is you have the necessity of being innovative.
Yes.
I have a necessity to deliver a product.
You have actually a budget from somebody else. And we do everything ourselves. Now we have a whisper room. I don't you know what that is.
Yeah.
You know, and so we actually can be a studio if you guys need to do something here in Atlanta.
One of the things that I found really interesting, and Tony said this to me, is being an independent production and doing science fiction, we're allowed to use the voices we want. And he said to me, he said at one point, he said, I don't know how people will feel about this. He said, because we have a scientist character and they have a Southern accent, but Southern people can be scientists too. And I love that. Yeah, I love that idea that the voices are so interesting. We have somebody from Cali who's playing a little bit of the outsider and sounds different. We have a talent who is also in law enforcement, playing a military person, and you just hear his voice and you hear the authenticity.
You can hear the right.
You can hear it. And to me, that's what's really fascinating about this. And the idea of doing this independently is hearing those voices you don't always hear, but they feel so authentic and so true.
Right.
I want to play something for you all, and it's going to be a giveaway when you hear it, but I'm going to play it and just let you hear what someone doing voiceover with very little acting. Oh, that's the wrong way to say it, but it's good.
The most amazing things in life are most amazing when they're real. And SeaWorld, truly real, incredibly amazing things happen every second of every day. Real animals, amazing encounters. Real twists, amazing turns. Real rescues, amazing stories. Real events, amazing moments. Because everything we do and you experience at SeaWorld is rooted in something real. And we think that's just amazing.
Okay, so did anyone see the movie John Carter, the Disney?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so that is Lynn Collins, who played Deja Thoris. I hired Lynn to narrate Princess of Mars for us because I was the guy who loved that movie.
Okay.
There was some...
It's like 4.
Yeah, maybe all of us. So I hired her to narrate Princess of Mars.
Yes.
And her agent said, oh, you've got to go through her commercial voiceover manager for that. And this is the stuff he sent me. And I said, oh, then I can't hire her. I need Deja Thoris from the movie. And
Wait, this is an actress. They can do multiple things.
Sure. My problem is when she went into the studio on the first day, this is how she delivered Princess of Mars.
Oh.
It was like, no. And yeah, it's exactly, this is not a can of beer.
This is what directors are for. No, I mean,
okay, that's exactly my point.
Yes.
Because I will say something negative about the the holy trilogy of Star Wars, Empire, and Jedi, in that George Lucas has to be the worst director for getting dialogue out of actors.
Oh, yeah.
And you can see the difference from the first, from A New Hope, which was still called Star Wars in my day, and Empire Strikes Back, in the delivery of lines from the same actors.
Yes.
And so directing does have a lot to do with it. But I think, you know, motivation also has something to do with it. And so I think what you guys are doing, and I'll tell you, you can fight about this. Right now, Hasbro's dying to find someone who wants to do Clue radio dramas, but they want someone to license it from them.
Oh.
Because when I went to them,
they want money, in other words.
They do want money. But the thing is, they're far more innovative now than they were 2 years ago because they realize the world has changed.
It has.
They divested of almost all of their toy business last year to start all film production. And that lasted under a year. They sold their film assets to Lionsgate this summer. So they're back into the toy business hardcore. They never left it, but I mean, they were taking, you know, all their stuff, their assets. But they're far more open-minded to innovative companies that don't have a lot of money. You know, there are people now licensing G.I. Joe figures from Hasbro instead of Hasbro making them because they have a better vision than Hasbro does for it. And so I would say this, Hasbro's dying to do a Clue radio-style drama. When I went to them to talk about it last summer,
We can write it.
they said, you know, if you do this for us, we will give you Power Rangers for a podcast. And I was like, big deal, until I looked at the numbers of Power Rangers, and kids are dying for podcast drama right now.
Yeah, there's really not a lot in that space.
That's true.
It's all, yeah.
But I just don't have the time. Our Ultraman project's gonna pull us so many ways. But anyway.
I'm sure Tony and I might be interested.
I think we could probably,
Well, I could probably make a connection
I
for
think
you.
that would be awesome. Yeah, I think we could put a proposal together.
I think you guys should, like, see who entertains me better. You know?
But I still want to have them more travel.
So you're not in the Atlanta area, right?
Well,
You guys are not in the Atlanta area?
No, I'm in Chicago.
Chicago, well,
Yes.
that's why.
Somebody needs to do Have Gun Will Travel.
I would love to do
Somebody
Have Gun
needs
Will
to do that.
Okay, but is Have Gun Will Travel public domain?
No,
that's why I can't.
they would have to be
That has
licensed.
to
but
license.
Is
Is
that
that
what
what it really is?
That series is a master class in storytelling economy.
Yep.
Yes.
And I just think it would translate
So,
very well.
I've said that to him for years. I would love to get that property.
Yeah.
Did you guys have questions?
I don't know about Have Gun Will Travel.
No, we don't have it yet.
Okay, yes, go ahead. Questions, please, from the audience.
Okay, so
Okay, well then, we can talk more.
we
We
can,
can
but
talk
I
all night
also,
about this.
I also want to just say that if anyone wants to get a sampling, I did bring a bunch of Dark Shadows and other Marilyn Ross audio books. I don't know if you know who Marilyn Ross is, but Marilyn Ross, she wrote the Dark Shadows paperbacks.
Oh, yeah.
Back, and she's really not a she, she's a guy named...
I was going to say, that was a state...
yeah, it was, when they were published, the publisher felt they were selling the paperback books of Dark Shadows to grocery stores. They weren't selling them in bookstores, and they were gearing housewives.
Yeah.
You know, they were 50-cent paperbacks geared at housewives, and so they felt they needed a woman's name. So William Edward Ross, who was writing them, he used his wife's name.
Nice.
And so Marilyn Ross went on to write about 300 Gothic romance books that weren't Dark Shadows. So I brought a couple of Dark Shadows, and I brought some other Marilyn Ross books, just because I love Gothic romance. So if any of you, especially the 4 women in the room, and I'm not saying that negatively, it's like, I'm kind of a girl, I love Jane Eyre, hated Wuthering Heights.
Those are great books.
Well, Jane Eyre's a great book, Wuthering Heights is awful. Worst book ever written. But,
That would be a show.
I have some. I have one.
Every English major in here.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
okay, well, it's just, I hated the characters, okay? The characters all deserved to die in Wuthering Heights, other than the maid who told the story.
By show of hands, Wuthering Heights.
I love it.
And Wuthering Heights is best appreciated as a horror.
Yes. Okay, but is it really? The only time the phantom scratching at the window references at the beginning?
Heathcliff is the monster.
Oh, well, Heathcliff as a monster, okay, I guess that's good. I just, you know, I had this vision because I learned about Wuthering Heights from the Kate Bush song back in the late 70s, and I thought it was going to be far more romantic and this love that transcended life. And then I read the book a few years ago, and I thought, these characters suck. They're awful. And my associate publisher, she said, oh, just wait till you read Jane Eyre. You'll feel totally different. And so that was my next book. And I was like, okay, this is great. And there's a really beautiful audio book of Jane Eyre narrated by Tandy Newton. She's, yeah, she was in like Westworld and things like that. But I mean, her version of Jane Eyre in audio is the best I've ever heard.
The accents, it's just unfair. They have that advantage.
Yeah.
It's just
Just
unfair.
that you have the accent.
Okay, so here's the deal. I'm giving these away. There's 3 of each of these, so I'll just pull back and everyone has first, I mean, whatever you guys want. At least if everyone can walk away with one, I'd be really happy. But just to listen to it, and these are not dramatized though. They might bore you after hearing what these guys do. They may be very boring because it's one narrator reading. So.
Not at all. I'm going to grab one.
And that can work if you have a narrator who really knows how to use his or her voice.
I
swear to you, because I've listened
agree.
to some really shitty,
Yeah.
and I've listened to some really shitty ones.
Oh my gosh!
Yes.
When I first went after the Edgar Rice Burroughs estate, it was because there was an audio publisher called Tantor, who for Burroughs fans knows that's Tarzan's elephant.
Yes.
They started about 30 years ago before they sold to recorded books. But Tarzan and the City of Gold, the guy who was reading it, I think had an asthma attack during the reading. And so every other line was like, you know, and then when Tarzan entered the, wow, this is truly awful. And so I thought, I need to do these better.
We have been lucky in that we've gotten permission from writers or their heirs to do some actual adaptations of famous science fiction stories. We have 4 Robert Heinlein stories that we actually have permission to do, and we performed them, all of them, at least once at DragonCon, and we were putting together more stuff. And that's one of the things is we go up and schmooze people and say, you know, you're not going to get a big name to buy your thing to make a movie. We don't want the movie rights. We just want the audio drama rights.
Okay, so that was 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's 3 minutes. You know.
He gave us 5.
I gave you 5.
We can keep talking.
If I dominated everything, I have the least to say, so I'm sorry, but you guys come up and take one, you guys take them.
Free stuff.
But it was, thank you all for coming. I was hoping there wouldn't be like one person.
We'll stick around.
Yeah, sure.
Yes,
We'll stick around.
and you can come up to and talk to us and things like that. We're very chatty.
Be prepared.